The betrayal at home. Leah Harris, a 35-year-old decorated veteran, had seen the worst of humanity during her 2 tours in Afghanistan. She had lost friends, endured grueling missions, and carried the weight of survival against impossible odds. Yet nothing had prepared her for the quiet battlefield she faced in her hometown of Atlanta, Georgia, a battlefield where respect and dignity seemed as scarce as water in the desert. Leah had returned home 2 years ago, her medals gleaming as symbols of her service, but they were also reminders of what she had endured. Struggling with the mental toll of war, Leah had slowly begun rebuilding her life. Therapy sessions, late-night journaling, and long walks in her Buckhead neighborhood helped her piece together a semblance of peace. That chilly Friday evening, she decided to treat herself. She had received her first paycheck from a part-time job tutoring high school students, and she wanted to celebrate with a nice meal. Leah's choice was deliberate, a well-known steakhouse in the upscale Buckhead district. She had heard colleagues and friends rave about it. Known for its buttery rolls, sizzling steaks, and elegant ambience, it seemed like the perfect spot for a quiet dinner. But it wasn't just about the food. For Leah, stepping into this restaurant symbolized something deeper, her reclaiming her place in a society she had fought to protect. She arrived wearing her military dress uniform, its medals polished to perfection. Her pride was palpable as she entered the restaurant. The smell of seared meat and garlic butter greeted her, and she felt a moment of anticipation. This was her treat, her reward for fighting battles both abroad and at home. As Leah approached the hostess stand, she noticed the subtle shift in the room. Conversations quieted, heads turned, and eyes lingered. At first, she assumed it was respect for her uniform, a quiet acknowledgement of her sacrifice. But as she stepped closer, the hushed whispers and judgmental stares betrayed a different truth. The hostess, a young woman with a tight ponytail and a detached demeanor, barely glanced at Leah as she approached. "Good evening," Leah greeted with a warm smile. "Table for one, please." The hostess glanced at the reservation book, her lips tightening. "We're fully booked tonight," she replied curtly, not bothering to make eye contact. Leah glanced around the dining room. Booths and tables were clearly available. "I can see several open tables," Leah said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm happy to wait if needed." The hostess hesitated, then leaned toward her manager, a tall man with slicked back hair and an air of smug superiority. The manager approached, his condescending smirk making Leah's stomach churn. "Miss," he began, his tone dripping with false politeness, "we have certain standards here." Leah blinked, taken aback. "I'm not sure I understand." The manager's eyes swept over her uniform, with barely concealed disdain. "We aim to create an exclusive experience for our guests. You might feel more comfortable dining elsewhere." It took a moment for his words to sink in. "Elsewhere?" Leah asked, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "You know," the manager replied, his tone sharpening. "Somewhere more suited to your kind." The room seemed to hold its breath. The weight of the phrase "your kind" hung in the air, heavy and vile. Leah's face remained stoic, but her heart pounded. She felt the judgment, the silent support of the manager's cruel dismissal from some patrons, and the indifference of others who chose to avert their gaze. Years of military training kicked in, and Leah resisted the urge to lash out. She had faced enemies who sought to destroy her. This man, with his ignorance and prejudice, was nothing compared to that. Without a word, Leah turned on her heel and walked out, her boots clicking against the polished floor. Outside, the cold air stung her cheeks, but it was nothing compared to the sting of humiliation. Her fists clenched, her heart raced, and tears of frustration threatened to spill. She had fought wars, survived ambushes, and carried comrades off the battlefield, only to be treated as if she didn't belong in her own country. But Leah wasn't one to let injustice go unanswered. As she stood outside the restaurant, the neon lights casting a faint glow on her uniform, she made a decision. She wouldn't yell or create a scene. She would fight back in a way that would shake the very foundation of the restaurant's smug arrogance. Pulling out her phone, Leah opened Twitter and began to type. Her fingers moved quickly, fueled by righteous anger. She recounted every detail of the encounter. The whispers, the manager's words, the empty tables that told the real story. She included a photo of herself standing outside the restaurant, medals gleaming under the lights, alongside the restaurant's logo. Her caption read, "This is what discrimination looks like in 2024. After serving my country, I was told I didn't belong in a restaurant because of my kind. Respect isn't just earned on the battlefield. It's demanded in everyday life. Hashtag veterans deserve respect. Hashtag equality now." She hesitated for a moment, then hit post. The tweet was raw and vulnerable, but it was also a call to action. Leah knew the power of social media and the voices of those who believed in justice. As she walked home, the notifications began pouring in. Retweets, likes, and comments flooded her phone. Veterans, activists, and everyday citizens rallied behind her, sharing their own stories of discrimination and support. By the time Leah reached her apartment, her post had gone viral. The first wave of messages came from fellow veterans who expressed outrage on her behalf. The second wave came from influential figures, journalists, civil rights leaders, and even politicians, who tagged the restaurant and demanded accountability. Leah's story had struck a nerve, and it was spreading like wildfire. The restaurant's management was about to face a reckoning they could never have anticipated. What had started as an ordinary Friday night was now the beginning of a movement, and Leah Harris was leading the charge. The rising storm. By the next morning, Leah's phone was buzzing incessantly. Notifications lit up her screen, each one carrying messages of support, outrage, or calls to action. She sat at her small kitchen table, sipping coffee, her eyes scanning the flood of responses to her viral post. What had started as a moment of humiliation had transformed into something far larger, a public outcry that demanded justice. The hashtags #veterans deserve a respect, #stand with Leah, and #equality now were trending. People from all walks of life were sharing her story. Veterans posted pictures of themselves in uniform, echoing her words about the silent battles they'd fought off the battlefield. Others called for boycotts of the restaurant, while some tagged prominent figures in the community, urging them to speak out. Leah felt a surge of hope. Maybe this time, things would be different. As she scrolled through the comments, her heart warmed at the messages of solidarity. One comment stood out, a message from a man named Tom Sanderson, a retired Marine Corps sergeant. "Leah, you're not alone. Let's show them what respect looks like. I'm gathering local vets to stand with you. Let me know where and when." Leah couldn't help but smile. She had never sought out this kind of attention, but she wasn't about to shy away from it either. The restaurant had made her feel small, as though her service and sacrifices meant nothing. But now, the weight of the community was behind her, and she was determined to turn this moment into a movement. As she was replying to messages, her phone rang. It was Clara, her closest friend and confidant. "Leah, have you seen the news?" Clara's voice was tinged with both excitement and disbelief. "No, I've been stuck on my phone all morning," Lee replied. "Well, turn on Channel 6. They're talking about you." Leah grabbed the remote and switched on the TV. The local news anchor's face appeared on the screen, and behind him was a photo of Leah in her uniform, standing outside the restaurant. The headline read, "Local veteran sparks outrage over discrimination at upscale restaurant." The anchor began recounting the events of the previous night, reading excerpts from Leah's post and highlighting the public's reaction. They even interviewed a few customers who had been at the restaurant that evening. One middle-aged woman, visibly shaken, said, "I saw the whole thing. It was disgusting. She didn't deserve that. No one does." Leah watched in awe as the story unfolded on the screen. The restaurant's manager and staff had declined to comment, but the anchor noted that the restaurant's social media pages were being inundated with negative reviews and calls for accountability. Leah's post had done more than she had ever expected. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the broader issue of respect and equality. Feeling a renewed sense of purpose, Leah decided it was time to take the next step. She called Tom Sanderson and told him about her plans. "I want to confront the restaurant, but not alone," she said. "This isn't just about me. It's about all of us who've been disrespected and dismissed." Tom's voice was firm. "You've got it, Leah. I'll bring the troops. We'll show them what unity looks like." That evening, as the sun began to set, Leah stood outside the restaurant once more. But this time, she wasn't alone. Dozens of veterans, many in uniform, had gathered to support her. Some held signs that read, "Respect our veterans," while others simply stood in silent solidarity. The crowd wasn't limited to veterans. Local activists, families, and even a few politicians had joined them, all united by a common cause. News crews arrived, their cameras capturing the growing crowd. Reporters approached Leah, microphones in hand, asking her to share her story. Leah spoke with the same calm resolve she had shown the night before, her voice steady as she recounted the events that had brought her there. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," she said, looking directly into the cameras. "I came here to have a meal, just like anyone else. But what happened to me is a reflection of something bigger, a lack of respect for people who've given everything for this country. This isn't just about me. It's about all of us." The crowd erupted into applause, their voices a powerful chorus of agreement. Leah felt a swell of emotion as she looked around at the faces of those who had come to stand with her. For the first time since the incident, she didn't feel alone. Inside the restaurant, the atmosphere was tense. The manager, who had dismissed Leah so callously the night before, peeked through the blinds, his face pale. The restaurant owner, a middle-aged man in a tailored suit, had been called in to handle the situation. He paced nervously, his phone buzzing with messages from concerned colleagues and furious customers. Outside, the protest remained peaceful but firm. Leah and the other veterans stood their ground, their presence a testament to the strength of unity and determination. The restaurant owner finally stepped outside, flanked by the manager and a few staff members. The crowd fell silent as he approached Leah. "I'm deeply sorry for what happened," the owner began, his voice shaky. "We're committed to making this right." Leah raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "And how do you plan to do that?" The owner stammered, "We'll issue a public apology and make a donation to a veterans organization of your choice. We'll also be providing sensitivity training to all our staff." Leah considered his words, her expression unreadable. "That's a start," she said finally. "But understand this. Respect isn't just a one-time act. It's a commitment. If you truly mean what you say, you'll follow through. And we'll be watching." The owner nodded, his face a mixture of relief and apprehension. As he and his staff retreated, the crowd erupted into cheers. Leah turned to the veterans and supporters around her, a smile breaking through her usually composed demeanor. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "This isn't just my victory, it's ours." That night, as Leah walked home, she felt a sense of closure. The humiliation she had experienced had been transformed into a powerful moment of change, and while the scars of her service would always remain, she knew she wasn't alone in her fight for respect and dignity. Together, they had turned a moment of pain into a movement of hope. The power of collective outrage. Leah spent the next morning responding to messages and calls, her phone a constant stream of activity. Among the countless emails and direct messages were heartfelt notes from veterans, families of soldiers, and even strangers who had been moved by her story. Each message carried the same thread: outrage at her treatment and admiration for her resilience. She didn't expect this kind of support, but she was determined to use it wisely. By midday, her story had gone national. Major news outlets were picking up the story, featuring her social media post, and diving into the history of the restaurant. To Leah's shock, investigative reporters uncovered that this wasn't the first time the establishment had been accused of discriminatory practices. Over the years, other patrons had lodged complaints, though none had gained the traction that Leah's story now commanded. Leah scrolled through the news articles with a mixture of vindication and disbelief. This was bigger than her. It was about systemic prejudice in places that prided themselves on their exclusivity. It was about respect, something every person deserved, but not everyone received. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Clara, holding a casserole dish and wearing a smile that could light up a room. "I figured you could use some food," Clara said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. She placed the dish on the counter and gave Leah a hug. "How are you holding up, girl?" Leah sighed, sitting down at her small kitchen table. "I didn't think it would get this big. I just wanted people to know what happened." "Well, they know now," Clara said, pulling up a chair. "And they're not letting it slide. Did you see that a veterans organization is organizing a rally outside the restaurant tomorrow?" Leah nodded. "Tom Sanderson called me about it. He wants me to speak." Clara placed a comforting hand on Leah's shoulder. "You should. This is your moment, Leah. You've got the whole country behind you." Leah hesitated. Public speaking wasn't her strong suit. She had led soldiers into battle, navigated dangerous terrains, and faced unimaginable horrors. But standing in front of a crowd and sharing her story felt like a different kind of battlefield. Still, she knew Clara was right. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about everyone who had been silenced, dismissed, or disrespected. The following day, Leah arrived at the rally to find hundreds of people gathered outside the restaurant. Veterans in uniform stood shoulder to shoulder with activists, community leaders, and everyday citizens. Some held signs that read, "Respect our veterans," and "Discrimination has no place here." Others simply stood in silent solidarity. News vans lined the street, reporters bustling to capture the scene. Leah's heart raced as she approached the podium that had been set up in front of the restaurant. Tom Sanderson greeted her with a firm handshake and a reassuring smile. "You've got this," he said. "Just speak from the heart." Leah took a deep breath, her hands gripping the edges of the podium as she faced the crowd. The sea of faces blurred together, but the energy was palpable. These people had come to support her, to stand against the injustice she had faced. She owed it to them to speak her truth. "When I walked into this restaurant 2 nights ago," Leah began, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat, "I wasn't looking for special treatment. I wasn't asking for favors. I was just a woman who wanted a meal. But what I got was humiliation. What I got was a reminder that even after serving this country, some people still see me as less than." The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers fueling Leah's courage. "This isn't just about me," she continued. "It's about every veteran who's been disrespected, every person who's been judged for the color of their skin, their gender, or their background. It's about the silent battles we fight every day, long after we leave the battlefield." Leah paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. She spotted Clara standing near the front, her face beaming with pride. "We deserve better," Leah said, her voice rising with conviction. "We deserve respect, and we won't stop until we get it." The crowd roared, their applause echoing down the street. Leah stepped back from the podium, her heart pounding. She had done it. She had spoken her truth, and the world had listened. Inside the restaurant, the atmosphere was tense. The manager and staff watched the rally from behind closed blinds, their faces pale. The restaurant owner, who had been trying to manage the fallout, paced nervously. He knew the situation was spiraling out of control. The negative publicity was driving away customers, and the restaurant's reputation was in tatters. "We need to do something," the owner said, his voice edged with desperation. "We can't just let this continue." The manager, still defensive, crossed his arms. "What do you suggest? Apologize to her and admit we were wrong." "Yes," the owner said firmly. "That's exactly what we're going to do." That evening, Leah received a call from the restaurant owner. His voice was contrite, almost pleading. "Ms. Harris, I want to personally apologize for what happened to you. It was unacceptable, and I take full responsibility. I'd like to meet with you to discuss how we can make things right." Leah considered his words carefully. She didn't want empty apologies or performative gestures. She wanted real change. "I'll meet with you," she said finally. "But understand this. I'm not looking for a personal apology. I'm looking for accountability. I want to know what steps you're taking to ensure this never happens again, to me or anyone else." The owner agreed, and they arranged to meet the following day. Leah hung up the phone, her resolve stronger than ever. This wasn't just about her experience. It was about changing a culture of prejudice and discrimination, one step at a time. As she prepared for the meeting, Leah felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. The battle for respect wasn't over, but she was ready to fight it, not just for herself, but for everyone who deserved to be treated with dignity and humanity. A brewing storm of change. The meeting with the restaurant owner lingered in Leah's mind as she prepared for the day ahead. The rally had not only exposed the restaurant's treatment of her, but also opened a floodgate of stories from others who had faced similar humiliations in public spaces. Leah was no stranger to adversity, but the overwhelming support from across the country stirred something deep inside her. A sense of obligation to ensure her experience sparked a lasting impact. Leah sat at her small kitchen table, the morning sun streaming through the window as she sipped her coffee. The newspaper headline read, "Veteran calls out discrimination in Buckhead Steakhouse. A nation responds." Below the headline was a picture of Leah at the rally, standing tall behind the podium, her uniform gleaming in the sunlight. It was a striking image, one that encapsulated her resolve. Her phone buzzed incessantly with calls and messages. She scrolled through her email inbox, which was flooded with messages from activists, veterans groups, and even politicians offering their support. Among the messages was an email from a civil rights attorney, Angela Warren, who specialized in discrimination cases. Angela's email was succinct but powerful. "Ms. Harris, your bravery in calling out injustice is inspiring. If you're open to it, I'd like to meet and discuss how we can amplify your message and ensure meaningful change." Leah's instincts told her this was an opportunity she couldn't ignore. She replied quickly, agreeing to meet Angela the following afternoon. While she appreciated the restaurant owner's willingness to apologize, she knew that an apology alone wouldn't address the systemic issues at play. Real change required a multi-pronged approach, and Leah was ready to tackle it head-on. That afternoon, Leah arrived at a small coffee shop downtown to meet Angela. The attorney, a poised woman in her mid-40s with a sharp suit and a warm smile, greeted Leah with a firm handshake. "It's an honor to meet you, Sergeant Harris," Angela said, gesturing for Leah to take a seat. "Your story has resonated with so many people." Leah nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I didn't expect it to blow up like this. I just wanted people to know what happened." Angela leaned forward, her tone serious. "And they needed to know. But this isn't just about one incident. It's about a pattern of behavior that goes unchecked in too many places. Your voice has power, Leah, and we can use it to make a difference." Over the next hour, they discussed potential avenues for action. Angela suggested filing a formal discrimination complaint against the restaurant, not just to hold them accountable, but to set a precedent for other businesses. She also proposed organizing a coalition of veterans and civil rights groups to push for legislation that would penalize establishments for discriminatory practices. Leah listened intently, her mind racing with possibilities. She had always been a fighter, but this was a new kind of battle, one that required strategy, persistence, and allies. "I'm in," Leah said finally, her voice steady. "Let's do this." Meanwhile, the restaurant owner, Greg Landon, was grappling with the fallout from the incident. The negative publicity had hit the business hard, with reservations plummeting and sponsors pulling their support. The staff was on edge, and the manager who had humiliated Leah was nowhere to be seen, having taken an abrupt leave of absence. Greg knew he had to act fast to salvage the restaurant's reputation. He called an emergency staff meeting, addressing the issue head-on. "What happened the other night was unacceptable," Greg said, his tone firm. "This restaurant has prided itself on excellence, but excellence doesn't just mean good food and service. It means treating every person who walks through that door with respect and dignity." The staff listened in silence, some nodding in agreement while others shifted uncomfortably. Greg outlined a plan to implement mandatory diversity and sensitivity training for all employees. He also announced the creation of a community advisory board to ensure the restaurant's practices aligned with its stated values. But Greg knew that wouldn't be enough. He needed to meet with Leah personally, not just to apologize, but to learn from her experience and collaborate on meaningful solutions. The next day, Leah walked into the restaurant for her meeting with Greg. She wore her civilian clothes this time, but her presence was no less commanding. Greg greeted her with a nervous smile, his hand outstretched. "Ms. Harris, thank you for coming," he said. "I want to start by saying how deeply sorry I am for what you experienced. It was wrong, and I take full responsibility." Leah shook his hand, her expression calm but unreadable. "Thank you for saying that, Mr. Landon. But I'm not here for an apology. I'm here to talk about what happens next." They sat down at a table in a private dining area, and Leah laid out her expectations. She wanted to see the restaurant's commitment to change, starting with the implementation of the measures Greg had outlined during the staff meeting. She also proposed that the restaurant partner with local veterans organizations to provide support and recognition for those who had served. Greg listened carefully, taking notes and nodding in agreement. "We'll do whatever it takes," he said earnestly. "This isn't just about fixing our reputation. It's about doing what's right." Lee appreciated his sincerity, but knew actions spoke louder than words. "I'll be watching," she said, her tone firm but fair. "And I'll hold you accountable." As Leah left the restaurant, she felt a sense of cautious optimism. The meeting had been productive, but she knew the real work was just beginning. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but with the support of people like Angela and the broader community, she believed it was possible. That evening, Leah shared an update on social media, detailing her meeting with Greg and the steps the restaurant was taking to address the issue. Her post was met with an outpouring of support, as well as pledges from other businesses to review their own practices. Leah's story had started with humiliation, but it was transforming into a powerful movement for accountability and respect. And for the first time in a long time, Leah felt a renewed sense of purpose, one that extended far beyond her own experiences. She was fighting not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been made to feel small, unworthy, or invisible, and she was determined to win. Uniting a movement. Leah's update about her meeting with Greg Landon was met with widespread support, but it also reignited a wave of stories from others who had experienced discrimination in public spaces. Her social media posts became a rallying point, and Leah found herself thrust into the spotlight as a voice for change. She wasn't entirely comfortable with the attention, but she understood its importance. Emails and messages poured in from veterans, activists, and everyday people sharing their stories. Many expressed gratitude for Leah's bravery, while others asked how they could help. It was clear that this incident was no longer just about her. It had tapped into a deep well of frustration and a hunger for justice. Leah reached out to Angela Warren, the civil rights attorney she had met earlier, to discuss the next steps. Together, they decided to organize a town hall meeting to give others a platform to share their experiences and to brainstorm actionable solutions. Angela assured Leah that the legal aspects of her case were progressing, but Leah was determined to take the fight beyond the courtroom. The town hall was held at a community center in the heart of Atlanta. The room buzzed with anticipation as people from all walks of life gathered to hear Leah speak. Veterans in uniform, community leaders, activists, and families filled the seats, while others stood in the back, eager to participate. Leah stood at the front of the room, her hands gripping the edges of the podium. The sight of so many people looking to her for leadership was both humbling and empowering. She took a deep breath before beginning. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Leah said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. What happened to me at that restaurant was not an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a much larger problem. A problem that many of you have faced in your own lives. The crowd murmured in agreement, and Leah continued, "But this isn't just about pointing fingers. It's about holding people accountable and creating a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of who they are or where they come from." Leah's words resonated deeply with the audience. One by one, people stepped forward to share their stories. A young black man recounted being denied entry to a high-end store because of his appearance. A Latina mother spoke about being ignored by waitstaff at a local diner. A disabled veteran described the challenges of navigating public spaces designed without accessibility in mind. Each story added weight to the collective demand for change, and Leah listened intently, taking notes and offering words of encouragement. She knew that the strength of their movement lay in the diversity of voices coming together to demand justice. As the town hall wrapped up, Angela took the stage to outline the next steps. "We're not just here to talk about what's wrong," she said. "We're here to take action. Together, we can push for policies that protect against discrimination, hold businesses accountable, and create spaces where everyone feels welcome." Angela announced the formation of a new coalition, Voices for Equality, which would bring together veterans, civil rights groups, and community organizations to advocate for change. Leah was named as one of the coalition's founding members, a role she accepted with a mix of pride and determination. The town hall ended with a standing ovation for Leah and Angela, but Leah knew the real work was just beginning. As she looked out at the crowd, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about her experience. It was about creating a better world for everyone. Over the next few weeks, Leah threw herself into the work of building the coalition. She attended meetings, spoke at events, and collaborated with Angela and other leaders to develop a comprehensive action plan. Their goals included pushing for anti-discrimination legislation, organizing public awareness campaigns, and providing resources for individuals who had experienced similar incidents. Meanwhile, Greg Landon kept his promise to implement changes at the restaurant. He invited Leah to observe one of the new diversity and sensitivity training sessions for his staff. Leah was impressed by the trainer's approach, which emphasized empathy and the importance of treating every customer with respect. After the session, Leah spoke to the staff. "I know that change isn't easy," she said, "but it's necessary. Every one of us has the power to make a difference, not just in our workplaces, but in our communities. I hope you'll take what you've learned today and use it to create a more welcoming environment for everyone." Her words were met with nods of agreement, and Leah left the restaurant feeling cautiously optimistic. Greg had shown a genuine commitment to change, and she hoped his actions would inspire other business owners to follow suit. As the coalition gained momentum, Leah found herself reflecting on her journey. She had never set out to become an activist, but her experience had awakened a fire within her. She realized that her voice carried weight, not just because of her status as a veteran, but because of her willingness to stand up for what was right. Leah's story continued to make headlines, and she was invited to speak on national news programs and podcasts. Each time, she used the platform to amplify the voices of others and to advocate for systemic change. One day, as Leah was preparing for an interview, she received a message from a young woman named Maya. "Your story inspired me to speak up about my own experience," Maya wrote. "Thank you for showing me that I'm not alone." Leah smiled as she read the message. It was a reminder of why she was doing this work, not for recognition or accolades, but to create a ripple effect that would empower others to fight for justice. By the end of the month, Voices for Equality had organized its first major rally, drawing thousands of participants from across the country. Leah stood on the stage, looking out at the sea of faces. She thought about all the challenges she had faced, from the battlefields of Afghanistan to the dining room of that restaurant. Each experience had shaped her, preparing her for this moment. As she addressed the crowd, Leah's voice rang out with conviction. "This is just the beginning," she said. "Together, we can create a world where everyone is treated with the respect they deserve. Let's keep fighting, not just for ourselves, but for future generations." The crowd erupted in cheers, and Leah felt a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. The journey ahead would be long and challenging, but she knew she wasn't alone. She was part of a movement, one that was changing the world one step at a time. Victory beyond the spotlight. Leah's rallying cry at the Voices for Equality event had ignited a spark that spread far beyond Atlanta. Her story continued to resonate, becoming a beacon for those who had felt marginalized or voiceless. As she stepped off the stage that evening, she realized that the movement she had helped build was no longer just about her. It was about everyone seeking dignity and respect. Despite the momentum, Leah knew that real change required more than speeches and rallies. It demanded persistence, tangible actions, and a commitment to dismantling deeply rooted systems of inequality. The next steps were critical, and Leah was ready to lead. The day after the rally, Leah met with Angela Warren and the rest of the Voices for Equality leadership team. The room buzzed with energy as they discussed the success of the event and laid out plans for the future. "We've captured the nation's attention," Angela said, her tone serious but hopeful. "Now we need to focus on turning that attention into action." The coalition had already started drafting a proposal for anti-discrimination legislation, which they planned to present to local and state governments. The proposal included stricter penalties for businesses that engaged in discriminatory practices, funding for diversity training programs, and resources for individuals who experienced discrimination to seek justice. Leah took the lead on organizing a task force to gather stories from the community. "If we can present lawmakers with real-life examples of the harm caused by discrimination, we'll have a stronger case for change," she explained. The team agreed, and within days, they launched an online platform where people could share their experiences anonymously. Meanwhile, Leah continued her work with Greg Landon and the restaurant's management team. Greg had not only implemented diversity training, but also committed to creating an advisory board that would include community members, veterans, and civil rights advocates. Leah was invited to join the board, and she accepted, seeing it as an opportunity to influence change from within. During their first meeting, Leah shared her vision for the restaurant to become a model of inclusivity. "This place could be more than just a business," she said. "It could be a symbol of what's possible when people choose to listen, learn, and grow." The other board members nodded in agreement, and Greg promised to allocate resources for community outreach programs, including hosting free meals for veterans and sponsoring local events that celebrated diversity. As weeks turned into months, Leah's efforts began to bear fruit. The Voices for Equality Coalition gained national recognition, and their legislative proposal was picked up by lawmakers in Georgia. Leah testified before a state committee, sharing her story and urging legislators to act. "This isn't just about me," Leah said, her voice steady but emotional. "It's about every person who has ever been told they don't belong, who has ever been made to feel less than. We can't change the past, but we can shape the future." Her testimony was met with a standing ovation, and the committee voted unanimously to advance the proposal. While there was still a long road ahead, it was a significant victory. Amid the public battles, Leah also found moments of personal healing. She reconnected with fellow veterans, many of whom had reached out after hearing her story. Together, they shared their struggles and triumphs, creating a support network that reminded Leah she wasn't alone. One evening, Leah received a letter from a young woman named Sophia. "I saw your speech online," Sophia wrote. "It gave me the courage to stand up to my boss when he made inappropriate comments about me. Thank you for showing me that I deserve respect." Leah's eyes filled with tears as she read Sophia's words. It was a reminder that the work she was doing mattered, not just on a systemic level, but on an individual one. As the anniversary of the incident at the restaurant approached, Leah decided to return, not as a customer, but as a guest of honor. Greg Landon invited her to speak at a special event celebrating the restaurant's transformation. The dining room was packed with employees, community members, and supporters. Leah stood at the same spot where she had been humiliated months earlier, but this time, the atmosphere was entirely different. Change is never easy, Leah began, her voice carrying across the room. It requires courage, accountability, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. But it's worth it because change creates possibilities. Possibilities for growth, understanding, and connection. The audience erupted in applause, and Leah felt a sense of closure. She had turned a moment of pain into an opportunity for progress, not just for herself, but for countless others. Leah's journey didn't end there. She continued to advocate for equality, mentor young leaders, and build bridges between communities. The Voices for Equality Coalition grew into a national movement, and their work inspired similar initiatives across the country. In her quieter moments, Leah reflected on how far she had come. She thought about the young woman who had walked into that restaurant expecting a simple meal, only to face humiliation. That woman was still a part of her, but she had grown into someone stronger, someone who understood that her voice could make a difference. As Leah stood on the porch of her home, watching the sunset, she felt a deep sense of peace. The road ahead would always have challenges, but she knew she had the strength to face them. And she knew she wasn't walking that road alone.